All right, let's get started. We'll give it about a couple more minutes or even seconds for a handful of people to hop on, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to our webinar entitled Pokemon Automates and Unifies Cloud Security with both AWS and Demisto. I'm Shri Sheth, and I'll be your moderator today for this popular event. We're excited for our very first customer case study webinar with Pokemon, and we're thrilled to see a record number of participants. Thank you to everyone listening and for joining us on this customer use case themed webinar. Just a quick review of our usual housekeeping items before we begin. If you have any questions, please type them in on the right-hand area of the GoToWebinar platform, and we will address as many as time permits. I'd like to keep this as conversational as possible. If you do have questions, please type them in. I'll address them if the topic is at hand. Finally, we are recording this session, and we will send you an email containing the recording as well as product demo links by this Friday. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our speakers. We have the rare privilege of having not one, but two speakers from Pokemon. First, John Wisniewski is the Director of Information Security Data Protection Officer at the Pokémon International, where he is responsible for security and policy development of corporate information technology systems, customer-facing systems, applications, and much more. Our second speaker is Sean Hastings. Sean is a security operations analyst at the Pokémon Company, where he establishes and enforces the company's security program and policies. Our final speaker is Pramuk Ganeshamurthy. Pramuk is the technical marketing manager at Demisto. Throughout his career, he has helped establish security operations centers for enterprises of all sizes and industry verticals. And now we will go ahead and turn it over to both John and Sean.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where everyone is dialing in from, and absolutely happy holidays. Before we got on here, I was just letting everybody know that I'm about to go on vacation, so if I start getting a little loose and free with this presentation, please bear with me.
He's ready.
One of the other things I did when Demisto first started talking to us about doing this case study was mention that I needed to bring Sean Hastings with me. I'm going to give you some context of what the Pokémon Company International is and how we kind of fit into the overall brand to kind of set the table for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about, from a strategic level, why Demisto was a good fit for the Pokémon Company International. But then I'm going to turn you over to the real brains of the operation, which is Sean Hastings, who's running point for us on all things Demisto, including our use cases, how it fits into our architecture, so on and so forth. As it so happens, Sean used to be an NSA red teamer, so he has a 50-pound brain, and you probably weren't expecting someone with that sort of a background for a gaming company webinar on this fine Tuesday morning. But I'll get started. So why did Pokemon choose Demisto? So as an organization, when Pokemon Go, developed by Niantic, exploded in the summer of 2016, part of the back end of Pokemon Go is through what's called the Pokemon Trainers Club. So think hundreds of millions of customers, all using our AWS platform. So not just folks that use it to authenticate with Pokemon Go, but also to play the trading card game online, which is a digitized version of our physical trading card game, as well as to take part in our organized play events, which culminate in our World Championships. One was held last year in Nashville, next year's in Washington, D.C. But essentially, think of that as sort of our overall way of interacting with our customers. And like I said, hundreds of millions. And the security team isn't also responsible for that. We're responsible for our normal corporate IT infrastructure. So it keeps us pretty busy. Adding some complication and some complexity to that particular environment is just how many third-party developers, third-party application developers, whether it's Niantic, whether it's Game Freak or Nintendo, whether it's some of the developers that we use for in-house. It really is a complex ecosystem. Most of you dialing in probably either work for security companies or banks or airlines, so you have very similar challenges. So that probably sounds very familiar to us. So the way that we tackle things, this sort of complex environment with limited resources from a manpower perspective, is to look at the security team as problem solvers first and security practitioners second. What I mean by that is because our environment needs to scale incredibly rapidly to keep up with the business, the security team needs to be moving just as fast to ensure that we're securing architecture as it scales up and keeping visibility over the architecture as it scales down to make sure we don't miss anything. So that idea of being a problem solver first and security practitioner second doesn't mean we're not thinking about security along the way. What it really means is as we bring efficiency and effectiveness to our DevOps teams, to our designers, to the company writ large, we're at the ground floor to ensure that we're doing things in a secure manner. Where that really starts to shine is this mentality that we automate everything that we don't need a human to do. There's a concept that you can go Google. I won't get into too deeply, but it's this loop of observing, orienting yourself, making a decision, acting, and that action is a sort of a test that feeds back into your loop, your decision loop. And the faster that your security team can tighten that particular loop, not only are you going to be able to respond better to incidents, but you're going to be able to keep pace with your business, with your engineers, with your developers in a way that security teams in the past weren't able to do. And so that's where Demisto comes in for us, is I want to make sure that my security ops analysts and my engineers are providing context to situations and automating everything that a machine can do just as well, if not better, and faster, more efficiently and more effective. Because I want Sean and the rest of the team to be concentrating on correlating data. I want them to be concentrating on who are the threat actors in the battle space. I want them to be able to pivot from each one of the platforms that we have keeping our customers safe, providing that human level context and not having to worry so much about getting that paper run book out and figuring out who in the phone tree they need to call and figure out which department needs to do what and which JIRA ticket needs to be submitted, so on and so forth. What this also allows us to do is keep our team light, lean, and agile. I put and small in parentheses, which is kind of redundant with the lightness. But the reality is even a company that has the monetary resources to hire a large security team typically can't find the levels of talent that are going to make them successful. The Sean Hastings of the world aren't coming out of the NSA, and they aren't growing on trees for your average organization to hire, develop, and retain. And so your ability to keep your team small and agile is key. And so that's the other part where our ability to automate a lot of our incident response, and not just our incident response, but some of the things we do with the IT team and the DevOps team in order to make sure that we can save as many FTEs as we can and invest in the smartest and the best and brightest of us, as opposed to trying to maintain an army of the mediocre. As you've heard me talk throughout this slide, I talk a lot about our DevOps team, our IT team, as opposed to concentrating on our security team. Part of the reason that we're able to become those problem solvers first is that we are really looking at what are those teams trying to achieve and how can we leverage our tool sets, Demisto included, to help them solve their problems and help them be faster, help them develop faster, but develop more efficiently and more effectively. What that really positions us as is InfoSec as an integrative agent. I tell this story all the time, and I'm sure there's at least 4 or 5 of you that on this webinar that have heard it before. Anecdotally, about 95% of the people that walk up to me at work are looking for a reason for them not to have to do something. InfoSec largely is looked at as the doctor of no. We're allowed to say, oh, well, that's not safe, so don't do it. We try to flip that on its head at the Pokémon Company. Instead of being those Dr. No's, we use that opportunity to be an integrative agent to try to problem solve and try to get our organizations to the point where we're enabling them as a business, whether it's in the technology organization or somewhere else, as opposed to just being the person that they go to when they want a no or a red light. So Demisto helps us a large amount in that, because with that automation first mentality, as these organizations come to us with problems, whether it's they're looking for a solution or looking for us to say no, the first thing we ask ourselves is, how can we use Demisto to automate that? How can we use some of the other tool sets in concert? How can we orchestrate all this together in order to achieve something for them? With that, I'll turn it over to, like I said, the brains of the operation, Mr. Sean Hastings. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, thanks, Sean. Remember that for my eval, please. Hello, everyone, especially my colleagues in the office waiting for me to make a fool of myself. Special thanks to our host at Demisto for giving me a chance to gush about your product a bit and share a bit about what we're doing. If I go silent at any point during this talk, it's temporary. It's just because I'm trying to spare you from a terrible cough that I brought back from reInvent. But with that, let's talk a bit about Demisto and AWS from a technical perspective. So one of the security engineers that I work with, Jacob Bordeman, who I'm sure is listening right now, he often tells us that he wants to automate himself out of a job. And while he's being a bit facetious, I subscribe to that same school of thought. I too want to automate myself out of a job, but it's less about automating everything so that we're no longer left with anything to do, so much as automating everything, as John mentioned, that a human doesn't need to be involved in, so that we can focus on the things that humans do need to be involved in. As John explained, we have a very small team. We're not getting much bigger, if at all. The SOC team is just myself and my colleague, Michelle, and that's on top of our other responsibilities, from purchasing and configuring tools to writing policy. Although I admit Michelle is the real superstar when it comes to policy. But the point is, we don't have the time to personally respond to every potential phishing incident, compromised credentials, or whatever other incident that SOC teams generally deal with on a daily basis. But there was a time when we did respond to each one of these. And the responsibility often fell on me. And a single phishing email, for instance, could take an average of 15 to 20 minutes per email. And at any one point, we could be receiving 4 to 5 of these phishing emails a day. So this really started to add up and cut into my operational time. And just to walk you through sort of the manual processes that I went through for what is generally a rather simple incident, you know, when we get that notification that a user has submitted a suspicious email to the appropriate email address or distro, I had to manually extract all the indicators, whether they're URLs, domains, IPs, whatever it may be, copy and paste them individually into VirusTotal, possibly run the email through a sandbox service, depending on whether they're attachments or a URL and so on. And God forbid, if any of these indicators actually turn out to be malicious, there's a whole nother kind of flowchart of events that need to take place, from logging into Mimecast, which is our email management software, creating a block rule, looking up who else might have been infected or gotten the email, check whether they bypass the warnings that we have in place, and then notify every single user individually and resolve per, you know, the individual actions that those users might have taken. So an incredibly time-consuming process, but it was one that never changed. It was the same flowchart of events every single time, regardless of the content of the message or how we receive it. And I think it was Jacob who determined, you know, hey, that sounds like an excellent candidate for automation. It's the same thing every time. Why are we wasting our time on it? So long story short, Jacob and I, we met up with Demisto at a conference in Miami some time ago. And we decided to run a proof of concept using that phishing use case that was becoming far too common for our team. So fast forward, what does a phishing incident look like now for us? Well, I look at a dashboard in Demisto and I verify that all the incidents have been successfully resolved. That's it. That's the value that we've seen out of Demisto. Every single step that I outlined is being automatically run as part of a playbook that's resolving the incident. It's keeping a detailed log of everything that occurred, and it's communicating with the customer more quickly and more effectively than I ever could. And what this means is we get better overall security because this all happens instantaneously. We get better customer service for whoever reported the incident because they're actually getting a message back confirming, receipt, confirming that action has been taken and letting them know if anything else needs to be done on their side. And ultimately, it gives me more time to focus on other things, right? So that's cool. It's basic, and really, what does it have to do with AWS, which is the topic of this talk? The same principles apply, right? Can we move to, oh, you're on the right slide. Yeah, you can go back, sorry.
Okay.
So I've listed 4 use cases here, and notice how phishing is actually still listed. That's because a successful phishing campaign could, in most environments, leave your AWS account vulnerable. Say if the victim were an engineer or privileged user or just someone with terrible security practices. But regardless, all 4 of these examples have elements that can affect both your AWS account as well as your on-prem architecture or SaaS applications. So let's run with that example. Let's say that your lead engineer's account has been compromised. How long would it take you to know? And how would you know how serious the damage is? Those are 2 questions that we have struggled with in the past. But this is where automation and orchestration has really made our job a lot easier. Again, a historical example. In the past, we would probably only find out about a compromised account if that user reported being locked out or other suspicious behavior, or if an engineer stumbled upon suspicious activity while they're looking through logs or doing some sort of auditing. And at that point, we'd likely pull in the entirety of IT, DevOps, InfoSec into a room, consult several disparate log sources, and try to find a lead to follow. I wish that I could lay out the rest of the process for you, but in reality, we didn't have one defined. And while we have several security measures in place to prevent this from happening, a compromise of local or SSO credentials, or worse yet, a password vault of some sort, could result in compromise of AWS credentials. And at that point, you need to be able to bridge that gap between the activity occurring in your AWS account with what's happening in your local environment. And this is where Demisto comes in for us, acting as that middleman that allows us to compile the AWS Security Hub data, guard duty, etc., with our Active Directory or SaaS logs or other on-prem resources, Palo Alto, for instance, all that stuff coming from local collectors or our SIM, so that data is all there in one centralized location, whether it's being fed directly to Demisto or able to be queried by Demisto, so that when Security Hub alerts us that an account may be compromised and has created that incident in Demisto, we can automatically run a playbook to contain and remediate the incident on both sides, right? This isn't a fully fleshed out playbook or a comprehensive list, but for example, you can leverage a lot of these built-in integrations, for instance, the Active Directory integrations to automatically lock the AD account. You could have a custom API call to disable LastPass. You could leverage the built-in AWS integrations to disable the user or the role in IAM, EC2 to isolate and snapshot any suspicious EC2 instance that was created by the compromised user. You could have Demisto check the logs for pivoting, run all known indicators against threat intel. You could have it generate a report for you, so on. This all occurs instantaneously, both in the cloud and in your local environment. And really, doing this manually, you're always going to be several steps behind and trying to catch up. But with automation, it's essentially over before it begins. And as someone who's done some red team activity in the past, I can assure you a human will never be as fast as a robot. You cannot beat the automation as a attacker. So let's move to the next slide and take this a step further. So hopefully some of you were fortunate enough to attend the wonderful talk that Ed Smith and Dave Williams, our senior DevOps engineers, gave at reInvent this year. But for those who didn't, I highly recommend it. The video can be found on YouTube. Just Google reInvent Pokemon. But for those who haven't seen it, in order to, and I'm probably not going to do this justice, but I'll try to summarize it. In order to combat a growing problem of bots degrading the performance of our authentication system for the website, for our games, Pokemon Trainer Club, our DevOps team, they developed an adaptive blacklist utilizing several AWS services, including Lambda, SQS, S3. And what it did was it blocked the users based on anomalous behavior as defined through CloudWatch events. Let's say a single user tried to log in 45 times in a couple seconds. Not indicative of a human. They would be blocked for a predetermined amount of time, and when that time elapses, automatically removed from the blacklist. And that's the last I'll say on that architecture, because again, DevOps team is probably cringing listening to that. But interestingly, it looks a lot like what you see in the diagram here. And that's because we thought, hey, if they can do this to automatically block bots, why can't we use a similar architecture to block other types of malicious activity, right? So we talked to the DevOps team, and they were generous enough to essentially copy the architecture and hook it into Demisto. So if we go back to the phishing example, let's say that Demisto has extracted all the indicators, run them through the threat intel, and determine that one of them's malicious. Well, now, in addition to having Demisto automatically create a policy in Mimecast to block it in future emails, we can be proactive. Demisto can feed that indicator in the JSON format that you see there on the left to the SQS queue in our AWS account, where it will be added to the blacklist and eventually picked up by our on-prem Palo Alto firewall. So we basically took data that was received in our local environment, pushed it out to the cloud, only to really be returned back to our local environment. And this diagram doesn't show all of the bidirectional communication that is also occurring between Slack and Demisto, so that we can get those real-time live updates as these indicators are blocked and other actions are taken through the playbook. So stepping back, what this means is that kind of holistically, when a user submits an email, Demisto will create the incident, run all the indicators through threat intel, block the malicious indicators in Mimecast, but also block all of it at the firewall level instantaneously. So even if the user clicked the link, all the traffic's already been blocked. And for those who are concerned that the whole system depends on users submitting these suspicious emails, don't worry. We have a system in place to alert us on suspicious emails before they even make it to the user's inbox. We just have an additional security option because no system is perfect. But what's in the future, right? So there's no reason why we can't eventually hook into the bot blacklist as well. With the wealth of data that we're collecting, including threat intel, who's to say that we couldn't leverage open source intel to block botting programs and users before they even attempt to authenticate, right? There are, of course, a lot of gotchas but what I'm getting at is that we're always looking into how automation can allow us to act preemptively rather than reactively. Let's move to the next slide. So with that, there are just a few key points that I really want to stress before we close out the Pokemon portion of this. We've said it several times now, but we have a small team. Security professionals are expensive. Company budgets are shrinking. And we need to do a lot more with less. And allowing automation to do those repetitive, predictable tasks frees up time for us to focus on other more important things that demand our time. Breaking down the knowledge barriers. So I know that using Demisto certainly doesn't make you an engineer, but it can make you feel like one. And what I'm getting at is that oftentimes your InfoSec team isn't going to be highly knowledgeable about creating CloudFormation templates or Ansible playbooks, or they might not know how to script complex API calls. I know that I don't, but that's to be expected in a lot of companies. And Demisto adds that abstraction layer. If a user can walk through the manual steps of a process, they can automate it. If they can talk you through the flow chart of events that occur in response to an incident, they can create a playbook. And that brings me to the next one, this low barrier to entry. If you get a new employee in, it can take them months to familiarize themselves with how you've built out your AWS infrastructure, how the roles are managed, how to perform certain tasks. But when a user goes into Demisto and looks at that playbook, they're seeing a graphical map of what's going on in an easy to understand sort of English format. Instead of 40 lines of, Python or Java code, you just have a step that says, block sender in Mimecast, for instance, right? And that allows even a novice to come into the company, immediately understand the security processes that are in place, and immediately start contributing and adding their own modifications or steps into the playbook. It's as easy as dragging and dropping. And lastly, I actually don't remember why I put this one. It was probably so I could slip in the evolving pun. But all in all, the time that you're spending not hunting down the current possible compromise can be spent improving the overall security posture and the overall security culture of the company. And ultimately, in my opinion, that's what's going to show the most value, not constantly putting out fires, right? It's exciting to, just jump from each emergency to the next, personally investigating and going through the entire process manually, but it's not very productive. So focus on the things that matter. And thank you for the time. I'll pass it back over to Demisto to close this up.
Awesome. Thank you both, John and Sean. I know for myself, I'm sure for the audience as well, but it's always beneficial to see how a customer is using a product in real time, especially when there are so many solutions out there. But now I'm going to pass it over to Pramuk from Demisto. He will be providing some more details on how to respond to specifically a cryptojacking use case through a Demisto demo.
Sure. Thanks, John. Thanks, Sean. And thanks, Sri. Before we jump into the demo, I wanted to talk a little bit about Demisto to benefit those who don't know us. Demisto Enterprise is a security orchestration, automation, and response platform, or SOAR, a term coined by Gartner. We bring efficiency to the security operations by automating incident response actions through our open and extensible platform. We believe that the modern day security is in fact an ongoing operation that touches every aspect of people, process, and technology as it relates to an organization, small or big. This really helped us think ahead of the time, and we built the platform from scratch to offer 3 core functionality out of the box. The core of the platform is an intelligent incident response workflow automation engine. It comes with a visual playbook editor security analysts can use to create task-based workflows, what we call as playbooks in Demisto. A playbook is essentially a well-coordinated sequence of analyst response actions. Demisto also has built-in out-of-the-box integrations with hundreds of security products across different security product categories, such as SIEM, CASB, endpoint, network security, also cloud infrastructure platforms. These API-based integrations exposes thousands of security actions. DBOT, which is a set of machine learning algorithms, makes active suggestions to the security analyst to help the analyst design response actions. Demisto also comes with hundreds of out-of-the-box playbooks that can be readily used by analysts without having to actually create them. So this really helps analysts in reducing time. The workflow automation engine hence really helps analysts to respond incidents with speed and scale. And this directly helps business to maximize benefits of cloud adoption as well as minimize the risk. The second core piece of the platform is a ticketing system. So the platform has a built-in out-of-the-box full-blown ticketing system that covers end-to-end incident management process and comes with incident ingestion, searching, querying, SLM metrics, and full dashboard and reporting capability. The ticketing system brings standardization across products, teams, and use cases, and kind of brings a discipline when it comes to the security operation. And lastly, Demisto platform brings in real-time team collaboration capability through the concept of war room or a virtual SOC. So think of all the security analysts actively collaborating in real time right from a single console or platform. It is the comprehensive collection of all the investigation actions, artifacts, and collaboration, which we'll see in the demo. It's basically also can be thought of as a chronological journal of incident investigation, readily available for review. Each incident in Demisto has its own unique space for team collaboration. Hence, the collaboration capability really improves the interactive investigation quality as well as removes chaos and confusion at the critical point of incident response phase of any security investigation. Let's quickly review some of the top cloud security challenges that we see. The first one that obviously comes to the top of mind is the dynamic nature of the IT ops that really demands flexible security, and due to this, different deployment models. Think of a single individual employee requiring different roles and permissions for executing different tasks. The second challenge is that of limited visibility. Cloud really expands the threat surface by manyfold. The ability to find the needle in the haystack really gets hampered by the lack of perimeter enforcements, third-party data processors, and the problem of the shadow IT. And lastly, the lack of scalable identity and access management has really led to an increase in account hijacks, insider threats, as well as it has made it much more easy for the lateral movement of the attacks. And to respond to these new cloud security challenges, we have built-in out-of-the-box integrations in the cloud security space. We integrate with the cloud infrastructure providers such as AWS with all services across AWS security value chain. We also integrate with other cloud platforms such as Microsoft and Google, as well as we have integrations with cloud threat defense products such as Redlock Palo Alto Application Framework, as well as leading CASB providers such as Netscope and Imperva. And all of these integrations also exposes thousands of security actions that can be readily used by security analysts to create playbooks. So what's the benefit of using Demisto or bringing your team onto the Demisto platform? Firstly, the platform will unify your security functions, be it network security, on-prem security, or cloud, or endpoint security in many ways. One of the ways also by coordinating enrichment and response for both on-prem as well as cloud security environments from a single common console. So this really unifies multiple different security functions into a single piece. So secondly, you'll also leverage AWS's zero trust security model. So this is one of the core value prop of Demisto's integration with the AWS services to execute actions without the need for having credential management. So all the integrations that we have, the different AWS services is keyless in nature. So we don't require any passwords or API key in order to integrate with any of the AWS services. So that's a huge win when it comes to security posture from a cloud security space. And thirdly, you can orchestrate security response by ingesting alerts from cloud environment and trigger automated workflows that span across different products. We recently announced integration with AWS Security Hub. We were the launch partners at the reInvent for the Security Hub. The Security Hub service from the AWS really gives you a comprehensive view of high priority security alerts across security as well as compliance status across the AWS accounts. This rich and powerful bidirectional API with the Security Hub really helps us play a key role in providing automated response capability across the value chain. given that we already integrate with many of the other AWS services such as EC2, GuardDuty, IAM, etc. But the core point here is that we can address many security response use cases with Demisto, ingesting alerts from the AWS Security Hub and responding across on-prem as well as the local cloud infrastructure as well as on-prem. And this really helps in orchestrating responses as well across different cloud infrastructures if you are truly hybrid cloud environment. As per the latest research, cryptojacking, which is the unauthorized use of another's hardware to mine cryptocurrency, has really become one of the biggest cyber threat challenges. And it has overtaken ransomware as one of the top malware in some of the countries. AWS recently released 2 new findings to detect such threats from Security Hub as well as GuardDuty. But how do you respond to those such detections? Let's jump into the demo and take a look at how can we actually automate the response piece. So let's go to. So what you see on the screen is the Security Hub page on my demo environment. And you see the top insights, which is basically a collection of high priority security alerts coming in from the GuardDuty and other integrations of AWS. So this is the Security Hub page. And on the number 24, you see AWS resources associated with cryptocurrency issues. And like I mentioned, Demisto has very rich and powerful integration with multiple AWS services, including the Security Hub. And under the settings, what you see is the integrations page. And we truly have a keyless integration. So all you need to provide is the name of the integration, which is Security Hub, as you see, and the default region. And you need to select a couple of incidents and assign an incident type here. And this is pretty much is all what you need. AWS Security Hub or other AWS services. So it's truly keyless in nature, and this is a core value prop. And these integrations exposes multiple commands that you see listed right here. So these commands, Security Hub as well as SQS and EC2. And that's pretty much from an integration standpoint that you need to do. It's really pretty simple and wouldn't take much time. It's pretty much plug and play capability. And once you integrate with the Security Hub, and let's go to the incidents page. So what you see on the incidents page right here is the same alerts getting generated on the Security Hubs becomes an incident under active investigation in Demisto. So on the incidents page, you see there are 2 alerts coming in from the Security Hub, and we also have the AWS finding type, the severity, and when did it occur. And Demisto really makes it really easy for you to search and filter across the information. So I have made Bitcoin as one of the key search word here. And I have mentioned the status of these incidents and pending and with high severity. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can go ahead and actively investigate in order to respond to this alert. So clicking on each of these incident takes you to this 6th section of the active incident investigation. You can also view these 6 sections as different views of the security incident. So at the top, you see the basic information, the type, the severity, who's the owner. Basically, you can actually assign an owner from your SOC team, the status, the source, the finding time, the AWS finding ID, and what instances were actually involved here. So you get pretty much all the information on the summary page. And like I mentioned, the War Room is a key differentiator of Demisto, because War Room really becomes a platform where you can capture each and every entry in terms of the investigation. You can also add the security analyst. You can actively collaborate, cutting down on confusion and chaos on whom to actually go ahead and interact with. And DBOT, as I mentioned, is a set of machine learning algorithms performing extremely specific task of identifying which analyst is the right point of contact for such incidents. And thirdly, we have a work plan, which is where we call the playbooks that we design in order to investigate those incidents. So I created a playbook called Responding to Cryptocurrency Mining Alert from the AWS. So let's go ahead and take a look at how quickly this playbook runs and what are the steps that you really take in order to mitigate this risk, or even responding when it comes to digital forensics incident response best practices. What exactly are you going to do when it comes to getting to tackle such a threat in the cloud security space, which is pretty much new and unheard of in the recent past, but it has become extremely critical at this point. So what you see here is this playbook is running at this point. So each one of these rectangular blocks that you see is basically a human task which is being done today across organizations. Be the organization small or big, depending on the business risk that you face, you really tend to have multiple different processes. But this playbook really makes it easy in order to respond to this in an automated fashion. So the first task really prints the particular incident details. So if you see here, dbot, which is again our machine learning algorithm, has printed all the information on the EC2 instance, which is being alerted from the AWS Security Hub. We have also marked it as an evidence. And secondly, the playbook also has a ticket in Jira. If you want to go ahead and use a third-party ticketing system like Jira, you can pretty much do that again in an automated fashion. And if you see, all these different tasks are executed in parallel, meaning it really wouldn't take much time. So there are two approaches to solving this particular problem of finding out what is the instance which is talking to a compromised domain, which is basically known to have be mining cryptocurrencies. So the very first step would be to get the instance details. So as you see, the dbot went and captured all the instance details, and you can pretty much see here. You also see the duration that it took, less than a second pretty much, to get the instance details. We're also getting the security group details in order to understand what were the security groups which were applied to that particular EC2 instance. And again, you can either revoke access to that instance, quarantine that instance, but that may not be the best practices. But in order to really do your DFIR best practices, you would want to definitely take a volume snapshot. So we again leveraged the enrich API, and we did take a volume snapshot. Again, didn't take much time. To do that, we created a tag on the EC2 instance just to help the enterprise, other team members know that this particular EC2 instance is going to be isolated and is under suspicion. And then what we do is, just like we used to do on the on-prem, we basically change the network interface security group, meaning kind of moving it to a different VLAN to really perform other forensic activities. The playbook is again sending an email to the analyst for the review, but also at the same time, Demisto can actually leverage the different integrations with endpoint solutions, for instance, Carbon Black, to initiate a quick scan on the EC2 instance, as well as find out all the running processes to perform memory capture and other advanced activities. Even those things can be pretty much automated. And on the other hand, what you see here is after opening the Jira ticket, we are also extracting the indicators. So if you scroll down, we have this IPs listed, which is basically under suspicion. And we are going to enrich those IPs with more information from our integrations with other threat intelligence platforms. And finally, we do a quick check on whether any malicious indicators were found. And if there were any malicious IPs found, we are using one of the firewalls to really block those particular IPs. And again, we are going to get a human component if you need to. We can always bring in a task in the Demisto playbooks for the analyst to come in and manually approve the playbook to actually go forward. And then we are updating the Jira ticket, and also we have capability to really run an investigation report right from the playbooks. And then we again, based on your actions, I mean, again, it really depends on the approach that you take. So you can keep adding more tasks, and you can pretty much automate the whole incident response process. So all these steps today literally takes, I don't know, maybe a couple of days with all the different instances. So I just demoed a particular single instance, but it could be many more instances. So we can pretty much go ahead and add another task, knowingly that there's one instance which is being querying a suspicious domain known to mine Bitcoin currencies. You can use those details to perform a quick hunt operation across other EC2 instances to find out if there are other suspected EC2 instances are found as well. And then you can loop back to perform the similar DFIR actions right from the playbook. And as you see, it's pretty much automated. We are creating this playbook once as an action to really respond to this incident. And what's again for the team in itself. So team, we really want the security team to focus on the security research. And for that, the Demisto war room will pretty much basically help in referring to each of the actions that were performed as part of the DFIR. So if you see here, all the task results are mentioned in this war room. And so as a security analyst, if I want to go back and let's say mark some of these artifacts as evidence for future reference or for compliance purposes, I can pretty much do that. I can add it as an evidence, note, or even view the artifact in a new tab. Similarly, I can go back and get my other team members into this particular war room so that they can also be updated about this particular incident investigation. So that's basically an overview of how quick and easy it is to really perform a quick forensics, in this case, responding to a cryptocurrency mining alert from the AWS Security Hub. But this really opens up much more scope for addressing many other cloud security use cases. So there are again other views in Demisto's investigation section. For instance, there is an evidence board. So all the evidences which we want to mark shows up there. And then we can definitely find out related incidents as well. So that's pretty much an overview of the response piece from a security incident perspective. So let's go back to screen real quick.
Okay, cool. Before we hop over to questions, I just wanted to say thank you to both John and Sean for showing us how the Pokémon Company automates and unifies cloud security using the joint AWS and Demisto solution. It was really great to see. And then I also wanted to say thank you to Pramuk for showing us the live use case and examples of this too. It's always beneficial to see it live in action. And with that, I think we can go ahead and open it up for some questions. We had a handful come in throughout the webinar, but feel free to add them in the bottom right-hand corner as well if any others pop up. Our first one is related to the AWS and Demisto integration. This one is asking, what AWS services does Demisto have out-of-the-box integrations with?
Sure, Shri. So we have around 10 integrations, starting from EC2, Guard Duty. We have integrations with CloudTrail, CloudWatch, IAM, Route 53, S3, SQS, Security Hub, and SageMaker. And we also have a few more lined up as well.
That's a lot. Okay, thank you. This next question is actually for Sean. It's referring to that one slide, Sean, you had with your 4 use cases on it. This one is saying you mentioned EC2 compromise as one of your 4 use cases. Can you touch more on that and what you're doing there?
Sure. So we are the release of AWS Security Hub was pretty exciting for us because it aggregates all that data and feeds it into Demisto. So now that we're really starting to alert on some of these possible compromises and incidents. What he was just speaking to some of the built-in AWS integrations. Some of them that we have found exceptionally promising and helpful are the EC2 integrations, because as I mentioned before, you can do some pretty neat things. You can snapshot an EC2 instance, you can isolate it, you can even do some forensics on it, which of course is key if one of them were to be compromised. The IAM integrations are also very fleshed out in that you can sort of trace the compromise, if you will, and automate taking actions and limiting the role of the user that might have been involved. So we're making use, or in the process of making use, of many of those AWS built-in integrations that he just listed off to take that action when Security Hub notifies us that something might be going on with our EC2 instances.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. And then this one is for both Pokemon and Demisto. It's asking, what are some top use cases apart from the cloud that we both come across? Sean, you want to go first?
Sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah. It's asking, what are some top use cases apart from cloud that you come across?
Obviously, I've covered the phishing one to death, but there are one of the things that we found is Demisto shows a lot of promise even outside of the security realm. And there are a lot of repetitive processes within our company, whether it's requesting clearance to certain projects or, requesting other accesses that are, again, the same process every single time, incredibly bulky and time consuming, requires manual approvals, emails being exchanged back and forth. Even IT processes such as onboarding a new employee, offboarding an employee, or group management, that sort of thing. So we've actually taken Demisto even outside of just the security use cases and automated a lot of those, or in the process of automating a lot of those business tasks as well. From the security perspective, we leverage Demisto a lot to make use of threat intel, CrowdStrike's built-in integrations with Demisto are expansive, and you can do a lot there. So any sort of compromise of on-prem, it could be as simple as a user who has accidentally run a bad script on their computer, and we can hook in CrowdStrike, hook in all the other integrations to automatically look into, is it bad, is it good? If it's good, let's whitelist it. If it's bad, let's blacklist, take further action. So we found that it's very versatile on both the security and non-security use cases.
Awesome. Pramuk, did you have a couple SOAR use cases you wanted to touch on?
Sure. The top of mind is really definitely the malware and phishing comes to my mind. But coming from a SOC establishment perspective and point of view, I really see also a bigger management sort of use cases, how to bring in discipline in a SOC, which is 50-member team, or even 2 to 50-member team, how to unify functions. So I think the workflows are really pretty intuitive. So from a playbook standpoint, definitely you can target phishing, malware, as well as other use cases. But I think bringing a process automation and kind of unifying functions is, again, key.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions here. So this first one is asking, is AWS Security Hub necessary to feed into Demisto? Or can Demisto be used without AWS Security Hub?
Sure, that's a good question again. Demisto also has integrations with GuardDuty. So the particular demonstration that you saw is definitely on a finding coming in from GuardDuty. So GuardDuty and other AWS services kind of point those alerts into the Security Hub. So we not necessarily know because it really depends on the use case, but I would say you can integrate with GuardDuty, get those security alerts, and perform similar actions.
Awesome. Thank you, Pramuk. Sean, I believe this next question was addressed to you. It's asking if you look at sensitive content being shared or downloaded out of S3 and use Demisto to trigger a playbook for it.
We're actually in the process of developing a playbook for that exact use case. It unfortunately turns out that unsecured S3 buckets and data leakage is a concern for companies like ours. And so far, it's been very promising. I would highly recommend setting up a playbook to respond to S3 data leakage type of incidents.
Awesome. That timing of that question.
Yeah,
This next one is a little similar. It's touching on the playbook component. It's asking, does Demisto provide playbooks for us? If so, how often are new ones added? And then do we have to make each playbook on our own? I believe we is referring to the person asking the question.
Can I speak on that really quickly?
Yeah.
I just have to say, the pre-built playbooks that are included with Demisto are exceptional. The phishing playbook, for instance, I had to make minor changes simply to change the language of the automated emails that are sent out to reporting users. I obviously had to hook in the AWS architecture for the automatic blacklisting, but the built-in playbooks are plug and play. And for the longest time, we simply used the default one to respond to these phishing incidents. In addition to that, to your credit, Demisto is exceptionally receptive to new feature requests. Before we still haven't exchanged money, but that's a whole different issue. But even as a POC customer, we asked for a new feature, IT related feature, and I believe it was released within 2 weeks or so. So highly receptive. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you answered
Sure,
it.
that was so perfect. I just wanted to add that we do have bi-weekly content release. So we keep developing more playbooks, push it out of the box. So those playbooks definitely act as a really good aid for security analysts, also as a suggestion to really plug and play and use it. So 2 weeks once. And also please feel free to go ahead and take a look at our GitHub. We make a lot of content available readily. So it's in the form of YAML files. You can also go ahead and refer that.
Awesome. Thank you, Pramuk. This next question, real quick, we have just a couple more minutes. This one's asking if we can touch on the keyless automation component.
Sure. So I have a slide on that. Let me just see this. So as I mentioned, and as we saw, Demisto doesn't really require any credentials, password, or API keys, really. And the reason for that is Demisto's user accounts are basically created in your AWS account. And once those your user accounts are created, every time an API call is made, Demisto, that user account basically goes and gets verified with the integration with Amazon IAM, which is Identity and Access Management. So with that integration, the Demisto's accounts, which are one-time configuration, gets validated. And we also have integration with the security token service. So the Demisto's accounts automatically assumes the appropriate roles, and we get a security token. And with that token, all these response actions, be it enrichment or auto response or orchestration across the AWS services, is performed. So it's really a built-in feature and really a big win when it comes to the security of cloud space.
Okay, awesome. We do have a couple questions, but it looks like we're running out of time. For the ones that we haven't gotten to, we will send you an email after to make sure that we're addressing your question. But with all that out of the way, I'd like to thank our presenters, John, Sean, and Pramuk. Thank you, audience, one last time for your questions and your listening. Please take a look at some of our supporting resources. You'll be receiving those in the slide deck by this Friday. Yeah. And check back often to our website. We're always featuring new content and webinars on the latest and most exciting topics in the security industry. Have a very happy holiday, and we look forward to working with you in 2019.